Hello, everyone. So nice to be here with you. This is Kabbalah Explained Simply, and today we have a really interesting topic. We're going to be talking about self-love and really, I think, the key to happiness. So worthwhile sticking around. I see some of you are already here. So nice to see you guys. Greetings from Pennsylvania. Hello from the Netherlands. Hello, hello. And shalom from Western North Carolina. Hello, hello, LA. Kabbalah Explained Simply. Oops, hearing myself. Great, so great to see everybody joining us. And we have a pretty packed talk ahead of us. I'm going to be really happy to see you guys also participate in the chat. Send us questions, any thoughts you have. Just take part, because this is really something I think that touches each and every one of us and our pursuit for happiness, for feeling whole, really getting in touch with our deepest values and truth. So I think we'll go to an intro and let's start. Let's begin. Hi, everyone. My name is Tal. I'm so happy to be here today. We're talking about self-love and probably a myth that we have in our society that if we just love ourselves a little bit more, we'll be so much happier and more successful. But we're going to question this myth. We're going to be asking some questions like, what is self-love? Is loving ourselves actually making us happier? Can we truly achieve happiness without first knowing our deep purpose, our higher purpose in life? And maybe there is a better way of reaching our goals of happiness, of self-realization, all those good things that we all want. So why don't you guys tell me in the chat, how many of you feel that self-love is a goal for you, that you have that goal of being more self-loving? And while you're telling me in the chat if this is something that you are in pursuit of right now or have been in the past, let's just answer quickly, what is self-love? I think most of us have heard about it. Basically, it's talked about as our ability to love and accept ourselves as we are, with our strengths, with our weaknesses, right? And it's really become a really prevalent goal in our culture. So this also sometimes includes self-care, maintaining healthy boundaries. And the goal here is really for us to be happy and confident, even enlightened human beings. So let's take a look at the current approach to self-love and why it may not be helping us to achieve these goals. So this is from an article from the Times Magazine by Maytal Eyal. And she really explained really nicely, really well, how the self-love phenomenon is bordering on a societal obsession by now, and it's pretty much backfiring. Okay, the title of this article is Self-Love is Making Us Lonely. So maybe this surprises you, but let's take a look at why this is happening. Okay, a lot of books, a lot of gurus, a lot of teachers are telling us that everything that we want, whether it's to lose weight or land your dream job or find your soulmate, get out of debt, right? All those things that you want all come back to self-love, to accepting yourself first. But this article really points to a darker side to this obsession. Here's a quote from the article. It says, "Today we live in a climate where needing help can evoke shame and embarrassment, where cutthroat competition takes precedence over compassionate collaboration, and where self-sufficiency is celebrated as the ultimate achievement." And so to navigate the harsh terrain of radical individualism, which is all over our culture, self-love has emerged as our tool for survival. Okay, so I'm seeing some comments here. If I don't love myself, how can I love others, right? This is a really prevalent thought, and we are going to be talking exactly about this mindset. Okay, so we see from the article that the problem with the way self-love is being tackled today, is being used today, is that it's being used in the context of this environment we're in that is very competitive, where we are ashamed to ask for help, where self-sufficiency is taking the place of collaboration. And so this hyper state of individualism is basically driving us to love ourselves while we're not really receiving love from the outside. Dr. Dan Siegel calls this state of our culture a culture of separation. And so many studies are showing that we're living in an environment, in a society of growing loneliness. They're saying it's an epidemic, right? An epidemic of loneliness. So there's all this research that is finding that almost 80% of adults are feeling lonely. And even before COVID, 54% of Americans felt like no one in their life knew them well. Okay, so there's something really, problematic happening here. We have something called touch deprivation. People are deprived of touch, of closeness. And Dan Siegel writes about how we are seeing more independence rather than interdependence, and individuality rather than a shared identity. Okay, so really our cultural emphasis on autonomy and self-reliance is creating a society that is full of disconnection. So already you're beginning to sense where I'm going with this, that our culture of separation and division, right? We're seeing so much division today around politics and all of that is not so healthy, right? It's not really contributing to our well-being. And so just trying to kind of put a plaster on that of trying to love ourselves is not really enough when our society is one that lacks love. Okay. So here's an example from what's happening on social media, on the internet. There's all of these advertisements that we're being bombarded with, especially women, right? That if we only use all of these little products for self-care and Botox and Pilates machines and all kinds of skincare wands and organic hair growth serums, all these things are going to make us happy. But these products, they don't really bring us together. And actually, they're promoting a kind of self-preoccupation that can drive negative social comparison because we're comparing how we look on the outside, right? We're seeing all these photos of touched up women, right? That the photos aren't real. We're comparing ourselves to that. And then all of these capitalistic interests are pushing these advertisements on us in the name of self-love and self-care to get us to buy more and more things that are only promoting our insecurity. If you guys relate to what I'm saying, let me know in the chat. Right? So we're seeing that. We're also seeing this culture of influencers, right? There's a lot of people who are going online and it's all about me, and a kind of even narcissism that is being normalized in a search for likes and followers. And the problem with that, right? There's nothing wrong with going online and sharing your voice. But the problem is that when it's all about getting the attention, we see from reports that it's actually harming the well-being, the psychological well-being of these influencers and their followers, because there's something about this culture that is very external and it's all about the attention that we're seeking and to be out there that is not really fulfilling us on the inside. And it's making us more and more judgmental about ourselves, comparing ourselves to others. How many followers does that person have? How many do I have, right? It all becomes a way to measure ourselves. And so we know that people go into social media and they get depressed. This is what the research is telling us. Okay, so this is really what psychology tells us. Studies show that too much focus on oneself is associated with anxiety and depression. So then it's no wonder that we're living not only in a society where we have a loneliness epidemic, but also in a society where we have anxiety and depression, right? Both of these have become leading causes of health problems, of are really degrading well-being. So This is interesting to understand about anxiety. If anyone has ever experienced anxiety, you know that what anxiety does is it really makes you hyper focus on fear, fear for the self, right? You're afraid that something could happen to you, that you might not survive. It's a fear for our most basic survival need. And so a person who is anxious is really pulled into themselves, and they're not aware of what other people feel, what other people need. Whereas if they could feel, and if they could rise above that fear for themselves, they would be free of the anxiety. You know, research says that giving is actually a great indicator of well-being. People who give, people who volunteer, this brings well-being into their life. So really, anything that draws us into ourselves and closes us off from other people is actually a detriment to our mental health. And this is a really, really interesting and important concept to understand, because even in the field of psychology and psychotherapy today, we see so much focus on our inner preoccupation, right? Even therapy oftentimes causes people to over focus on themselves. I don't know if you have experienced this, but sometimes people go to therapy and are advised to sacrifice relationships for their personal goals, or to blame other people for their problems and pain, especially our parents, right? To justify ourselves and blame others. So this is an interesting quote from Freud's granddaughter, Sophie. She said, "It is utter nonsense to make people talk only about themselves all the time." Okay, so we see that there's something about the way that we're doing things, even helping each other feel better, that is pointing us in the wrong direction. When psychotherapy puts all the emphasis on treating individuals, it's really overlooking the fact that we are not separate, that we are connected. And if you want to treat the individual, you have to treat the individual in the context of their family, their couple relationship, and the society that we live in. Okay? It's like they say you have to treat the whole village, right? You need a whole village to raise a child, and you also need the whole village to treat our well-being. Okay? Because there's no such thing as an individual who's not connected to other people. Okay, so let me know in the chat if this is resonating for you. You can send your questions, and I will be taking questions. So let's see a few more quotes. This is from Alfred Adler, and he said, Alfred Adler, by the way, he lived at the same time as Freud, and they even worked together at a time, but Adler had a real focus on the social aspect of our being. He said, human beings are social creatures, and therefore every problem that we have in our life is a social problem. And he really refused to look only at treating individuals. And he said, if we want to treat an individual, we have to look at their environment. And in our current society of hyper-individuality, we know we have a race for achievement, to be special, to be above other people, right? We have that. Society is basically telling us that that's what we need to be special, to be successful, to be a winner. Okay, so there's all this emphasis that life, it needs to be fun. We need to be happy, but we have to do it by ourselves, right? We have to be happy somehow on our own. And when we're getting all of these messages, then we have no desire to make concessions or to compromise. And that makes it so much harder for us to enter a relationship and to stay in a relationship. And we know from all that Harvard research that relationships is really the main cause of happiness. It's the main source of happiness for human beings. So you see that we're living in a culture that is constantly telling us you need to be happy, you should love yourself, you should find that happiness within you. But the whole time it's making it so difficult for us because the society itself is one of division, hyper individuality, competition, and all of these capitalistic aims of materialism that aren't promoting happiness at all. Okay, so I think we've covered that enough. And now after we've understood why the self-help goal or movement, self-love, the goal of self-love as we're using it today, as we're seeing it today, is not really helping us reach those goals of happiness and health and well-being. Let's take a look at what Kabbalah says about all of this, about why this really isn't happening by coincidence, how there really is a reason for everything that we're seeing in our world, and that it's all part of a bigger process that is leading us to happiness, that is leading us to all those goals that we want to make happen, except we have to learn how. We have to learn to see everything from a higher perspective, and then we'll understand why things are going wrong and how to fix them. Okay, let me just take a look for a moment if you guys have any questions. Okay, so if you do, keep them coming. Okay, so self-love from a Kabbalistic perspective. Kabbalah, this may surprise you if you're not really, if you don't know Kabbalah, if you haven't read any of it yet, but it really sees self-love in a different way. From a Kabbalistic perspective, self-love is really all that we are, okay? It's really what our universe is made of. It's really the matter of everything, from the rocks to the plants to the animals to people, everything around us. It's really all self-love. And what do I mean by that? It's that drive, that force that drives life, right? You could say it's the survival mechanism that we all have. It's that mechanism that is driving us to feel good and to stay away from anything that is bad for us. It's what drives us to procreate and to, right, and to further the generations. This is what drove us as human beings when we were cavemen to survive, and it's constantly evolving in us as human beings, not in animals or plants or rocks, but us human beings, we are more evolved creatures, so our self-love is constantly growing. So if cavemen, all their self-love was about survival, we are now much more evolved human beings. We have much greater desires. To love ourselves today means a lot more than what it meant thousands of years ago. Okay, so what's happened is that this drive to feel good, to feel happy, to fulfill ourselves, which Kabbalah calls self-love, has really driven our evolution and created this society that we see today. Because the mechanism of self-love is one where we see reality through the prism of the self. Okay, we see everyone else through the prism, and everything for that matter, through the prism of what's in it for me. Okay, this is not something to be ashamed of. It's just the way that we're made, right? We're always seeing things around us from that prism of how relevant is this for my survival and for my well-being. If we think something is not relevant for us at all, we just don't see it. Okay, and there's science behind what I'm saying. It's like a filter. We have a filter on our senses where they only perceive things that matter to us personally, things that have relevance to our survival or our well-being. Okay, so I see some questions and we'll get to them in a moment. I see your questions. I know what you're asking, and I've put it in the slides because I know that this raises so many questions for us. Okay, so just to understand, this is a really important principle, to understand that self-love, that drive that we have to receive pleasure, to feel good within ourselves, it's not something we can run away from. It's just the way that we're made. It's making us see reality through that lens. If you just think about it for a moment, how many times did you think about what you want today? Whether it's to eat, or maybe to feel, maybe it was cold or hot in your room, maybe it's your dreams, your aspirations. How many times did you think of those things? Whereas how many times did you think about the hopes and dreams of other people in the world, maybe even people who are starving, or people who really need help? Just think about that. And again, this is not something to judge. It's just something to look at and realize that this mechanism that is in charge of us is constantly making us focus on our own desires, hopes, and dreams. And it's kind of shutting us off of what other people feel, think, and want. Unless, of course, they're connected to us, like our kids or our husband and people who we depend on. that makes their desires and thoughts and feelings much more relevant to us. And so we kind of include them in our thought processes. Of course, we sometimes give and we sometimes volunteer and we sometimes do things for others. We'll get to that as well. But our basic mechanism is still seeing reality through that filter. Okay, so Kabbalah explains this process that since we have this internal mechanism that is really self-involved, we created that society that we talked about before, a society of separateness, of division, of competition, where personal interests are driving the show. We see that. We see that our world is really rife with these personal agendas pulling us apart. It's nothing, we can't hide from that. We want to see it so that we can start to fix it. Okay, but Kabbalah is also telling us something really interesting, that all those things that happened in the last century, what we talked about, the capitalistic machine and how we've become kind of like rats in a race, right? Where we just want to be happy, but we're stuck in a society that is constantly expecting us to be better and more successful and more rich and more famous. And all these things are kind of forcing us into a race that is so pressuring and so difficult, right? And so in a way, self-love for us as human beings has taken a kind of wrong turn, or it's kind of overcome the peak. Whereas we thought we could achieve an American dream, and if we have enough technology and material assets, we're just going to be happy. We see that it didn't work. That something about the way we're built has created an environment that doesn't support our self-love. It doesn't really make us happier. And so Kabbalah explains that this has become because we have entered a new era. We've entered a new era where that mechanism of self-love, of individual survival and competition has kind of reached that peak where it's kind of like a caterpillar that's eaten and eaten and eaten its way, and it's satiated and it can't continue to evolve on the same level, right? It needs to begin a new level of evolution, of development, and that is where we are. So all those negative things we talked about, all of that is happening for a reason, right? It's happening to help us see that we have to find a better way. That if we really want to feel happy and fulfilled, then we have to be able to transcend that old way of thinking, the old way of behaving, and create a new environment where this will be possible. So let's talk a little bit about this higher consciousness that needs to emerge, that wants to emerge. And maybe some of you are already feeling it. Maybe some of you are already seeking a higher way to see yourself, to see life, to experience life. So the higher consciousness that wants to emerge is first and foremost about understanding that there is this program that is operating in our life, a higher program. We can call it nature, you can call it God, creator, the universe, but there's a program, there's a process, that things are not a coincidence. Like I was saying, everything is leading us to our higher levels of development. And it's really from this higher level of consciousness that we can truly begin to relax from all those anxieties and fears and things that are driving us to seek refuge in self-love. For example, what we can see from this higher level of consciousness, where we understand that nature is this beautiful integral system where everything is purposeful, is that you and I, we're all made purposefully, just like everything else in nature, right? We're all unique, valuable, and needed parts of a whole that is greater than the sum of all of us, but each of us is uniquely valuable. So this is healthy self-acceptance, because it comes not from comparison to others, but rather from an understanding that we are part of a whole and there's no one else exactly like you who can perform the role that you are meant to perform in the context of this connection. So it's easier for us to see that on the human body, right, where it has all these different organs and we know that they're necessary and important. It's easier to see it when you look at flowers, right, and you don't compare them because they're each so beautiful. It's harder for us to see this on ourselves and think, oh, I'm such a beautiful piece of art that nature made and I don't compare. No, because society is full of comparison. But when we rise to this higher perspective, then we're able to gradually shift into this much more healthy way to see ourselves. Now, it's not just about understanding, it's really about shifting how we think and feel and behave. So you probably have heard of this statement, right? Love thy friend as thyself, or love thy neighbor as thyself. This is very well known. Now, this is really a formula. It's a formula for enlightenment, for happiness, for alignment with nature, for everything good that we want to achieve in our life. Because love thy friend as thyself is really our ability to see ourselves and others as those parts of the whole, and also to make that a reality in our hearts and our inside of us. And it's really telling us that self-love, right, however much we love ourselves, should serve as an example of how we should treat others. So remember, I told you before, think about your day. How often were you able to think about other people's needs and other people's well-being? So in the more harmonious state that we're heading towards, we are able to feel that we're not separate and that everybody else is connected to us. And we're able to be free of our fears and anxieties because we're constantly sharing this one field of connection where we're all caring for each other, where we're all thinking for the well-being of each other. And in this way, you can imagine how different that is from our current society where we're all on this race for survival on our own. So imagine a society where we're all considering the well-being of others and really thinking of them and not just of ourselves. And so here, I just want to jump to this slide here because you might be thinking, what about my needs, right? If I'm just caring for other people, then what about me? Well, who's going to take care of me? So this is where I want to say that this does not come instead of taking care of yourself in a healthy way. It's not instead of making sure you sleep enough, you eat enough, you get your needs met. Because in a healthy state, like in the human body, for example, every cell has to receive the nutrients and the life and the energy in order to perform its role. So it's the same for us. Even in this higher state of consciousness where we're focused on others and loving and we're creating this harmonious alignment with nature, we're still taking care of our basic needs. You know, they say on a plane, they always tell a mother that she needs to put the air mask on herself first, right? So it's just like that. It's like a mother, she cares for her children. She's connected to them. She's not, thinking of herself and to survive by herself. She instinctually thinks of the well-being of her children, which gives her a lot of joy and expands her heart. We all know that. But still, she has to take care of those basic needs first so that she can care for them. So again, there's nothing to be ashamed of. We have to take care of ourselves. And in fact, Kabbalists exercise and take care of their bodies, and they do not neglect themselves because they realize that if I want to help others, if I want to make contributions to this world, I have to be healthy and I have to take care of that, just as I would if I were a cell in the body of humanity. Okay, I want to take one question that I saw here. Okay. So what if this is from Emmy Wodu? I hope I am saying that correctly. What if the society or the people around you are egoists, like the people of Sodom and Gomorrah? What would you do in that case? What would you do if you don't find like-minded people who are on the path of Kabbalah? So that's a great question, and it does come up often. People say, well, you're telling me I have to love other people, but people around me, they could use that. They could use me. They could use that in a negative way, and I could get hurt. And this is true. This is actually very true. And we're not advising you to go and open your heart to everyone around you immediately. This is really something that we want to practice inside of an environment of like-minded people who share our goal, who also want to evolve consciously and to discover this new level of connection between human beings. And in that environment, that's where you're safe to practice, to let down your guard, to allow yourself to explore connection, and so on. And so you don't want to be practicing this yet with other people. You want to be doing this in this dedicated environment. However, you should know that since this is really the direction that all of nature is headed into, everybody is being pushed into this integral state. And so when you're working to change yourself in that environment that you're in with other people, maybe even it's your spouse or in your family, if everybody wants to work on that, you see that by evolving yourself, you are influencing other people indirectly because they feel this change from you, and they also change. We have mirror neurons. We're interconnected. When one person changes, it's like the butterfly effect, right? We change, people and the whole system around us changes. So even if people aren't on the same page or vibration with you yet, they are changing, and gradually they will be. Okay, so we need to have patience. Okay, yeah, I see other questions that are similar. Yeah, so we still need to protect ourselves in external environments, like I was saying, but keep growing, keep going, and you'll see that eventually people will change and come around. Nature is working on it and helping us. Okay, so keep the questions coming. I will probably have some time left at the end, so we'll answer them. Just for now, I want to answer this question that people had before, and I have here on my slide. So a lot of people ask, can you really love other people before you've learned to love yourself, right? Because it says love others as yourself. So if I don't love myself, how am I going to love others, right? This is a really prevalent question. And to this, Kabbalah says that the truth is that we're not even aware of how much we love ourselves. We're not even aware. We think that we love ourselves, that we hate ourselves when we're critical, right? And when we are self-sabotaging, and we'll get into that in this next slide. But the truth is that we're focusing on the self. And until you transcend yourself and make an effort to try and love others, to try and divert your thoughts to other people, you'll never really see or know how much you truly love yourself, how much those thoughts and emotions and ambitions revolve around the self. And this is true for everybody. This is just our nature. Okay, so afterwards, try it at home, do that exercise where you try and shift your thoughts to other people, even for part of your day, and you will realize how hard that is because our inner mechanism is always pulling us back in. Okay, and this happens consciously and subconsciously. Okay, we're not in control of it. It really closes us off within ourselves, and we can't escape. We will talk about how to escape in a moment when we have the right environment, but by ourselves, we can't change it. And like I was saying, self-love can masquerade as self-criticism and even self-destructiveness. Okay, because all of these things are driven by our desire to feel better, to be better, right? What is self-criticism if not self-involvement, if not a desire to be someone else, someone better? It's still all about our personal benefit, whether it's self-praise or self-criticism. Both of them are still forms of self-love because they revolve around us and they're motivated by a desire to fulfill our personal needs or expectations. And so everything a person does, even if it looks destructive, it's still self-love in the sense that it's focused on their self. And like we saw before from evidence from psychology, that the more a person is pulled into themselves, the more they become anxious and destructive and all those negative psychological phenomena. It comes from this preoccupation with the self. Okay, so all of this preoccupation, Kabbalah calls it self-love, even though it's really self-hate, right? We know that it's hateful to be so preoccupied with yourself because it doesn't really help you. But if you learn how to transcend that, if you learn how to transcend this preoccupation, that will be much more loving. That would be much better for you. Okay, I want us to take a few more examples about how Kabbalah helps us to be free of this inner mechanism that really makes us suffer, okay? Because even though it's kind of not intuitive, because I'm telling you, don't love yourself, or in the sense, don't focus on yourself, it's really the best thing we can do for ourselves. So here's another example. Oftentimes, when something negative happens, right, in our life, maybe we failed at something, something happened in a relationship, we had a fight, I don't know, whatever. Sometimes what happens to us is we get drawn into all that self-criticism and all these negative thoughts, like, why did I do? Why did I say that, right? And I should have done it differently. And Kabbalah tells us that it's a fool who folds their hands and wastes away. So what does this mean? It means that if we fold our hands, meaning we just kind of stay idle, and I'll tell you what you can do in a moment, but if we don't do what we should be doing, we just waste away by kind of eating ourselves up and lingering in that dark place of thinking about the past and criticizing ourselves and really feeling bad about what happened. We're disconnecting ourselves from the good that does good. If anybody of you know that, I'll explain in a moment. We're disconnecting ourselves from forward movement, and really it's foolish. So what does Kabbalah offer or advise us to do instead? This is where we want to feel that we're being hugged by a motherly force. It's really advising us to forgive ourselves, to let go of anger and blame, because we want to remember that we're inside the program, right? We're inside this bigger program, this bigger process. And everything that happens to you, everything that happened even a moment ago, was not your fault. It was a program, and everything is already predetermined, except for the free choice that you have in the present moment. But everything that happened in the past, Kabbalah tells us, happened just as it needed to happen. And it always happens for our highest good. It always happens to help us progress, to help us advance in our conscious evolution process. So don't criticize yourself, because you're not as in control as you think you are. There is a higher power here at work. And, anger and blame, they're not helpful, because they're really stopping you from doing the one thing that can really help. And that one thing, and this is what Kabbalah teaches. If any of you are studying, you know that this is the main thing that we're doing in the study. We learn how to pull the positive force of nature, of connection, of love into our world, into our life. How do we do that? Very shortly, we connect with other people who study. We read excerpts that talk about the higher level of unity of nature, and we play or fake it till we make it. We act out this connected state of love and connection, and by that we draw these higher states of consciousness into our present. And so when we kind of stop and start criticizing ourselves over the past and think about how bad we are and all those negative thoughts, we're not doing the one thing that can really help and bring goodness into our present moment, which is prayer, which is connection, which is love. So though our path is determined from the start, our free choice is to pull those higher levels of consciousness into our present. This is also called quickening the times. We quicken the time. The higher states, we're going to be pushed into them whether we want to or not. But the more we can consciously draw them in by learning, by using the method of Kabbalah, the more we will experience the process harmoniously and as easy and pleasant. So we want to shift consciously from the self-focus, from all these negative thoughts that we have, to other people, to connection, to caring for other people. The more we can do that, the more we draw the positive force, and the better we will feel. It will also change our circumstances for the better. This is what creates a better reality. When we pull the positive force, it changes our reality. This is the key. The key to making, there's all these teachings about how to attract positive circumstances, right? Law of attraction, all that stuff. So the more you are giving and loving, the more you align with that vibration of nature, the more you attract loving, good, positive results in your life. Okay. let's move on to another slide that will also talk about probably what you were asking about people pleasing, about how a lot of us are in a place where we're focused on other people, but it's from a place of pleasing them. And again, this is not what Kabbalah is telling us to do. People pleasing, I think there's a percentage of humanity that are altruistic by nature, in the sense that they are, they contribute to humanity, they raise money and funds for others, they help people in distress. And it also exists in many of us, right? We can see that we sometimes do that, but it's still on that level of consciousness that is, again, inside that mechanism that we were talking about. It's still not from that higher perspective of interconnectedness. We're still people pleasing because we still want to get something in return. Something, it could be just feeling good. It could be seeing ourselves as good and benevolent, right? A better self-image. It could be getting a certain response. Maybe we grew up in a home that taught us this is how we get love, so we're doing it to get love. In any case, it will come back to the self in some way. The motivation is still the self. And so we're still locked inside that loop, and it's not really aligned with nature's quality of true altruism, true love, selfless love. Because the moment we have that true quality of love, then we experience the spiritual world because we're aligned with it. This is how spirituality works. It's all about alignment with frequencies. If we are people pleasing, but we are not experiencing the upper worlds, we're not experiencing higher love, we're not experiencing the oneness of creation, then we're probably not loving the other in the spiritual sense. It's probably still coming from the ego. Okay, so I hope this answers your question about that. We see this a lot in relationships. We see this a lot with couples. And I want to say another thing about this. When you study Kabbalah, you become very much aware of your own ego and also other people's ego. So it's much easier for you to place boundaries and not allow other people to use you, other people's ego to use you. It's much easier to say no because you're doing it from a higher perspective, from the intention, right? To you intend for the highest good of all. And so you know that when you're saying no to someone's ego, you're not being bad. You're actually doing what's better for them. And the best example is that when we are parents, right, we don't give our children everything they want and ask for. We only give them what is good for them. Okay, so when we have an attitude of love and unity from the Kabbalah perspective, then we're not people pleasing. We are placing boundaries, but we're giving in a way that is truly loving from a higher perspective. We also remember that, the program, that creator is in control, and we can't fix it all by ourselves. We are just conduits of love. And this quote here from Proverbs, teach a child according to his path, it really is helpful for us to understand what that love is, that love of others that is true, a love that does not come back to us. This is about really feeling and seeing other people as they are and wanting to give them and teach them in a way that is good for them, right? Like a parent that sees their child and is not trying to force them to go and learn what the parent thinks they should go and learn and study and become. They're not forcing what they believe. They want to see and look and study their child and help them to become who they want to be, who they are meant to be. So this is the kind of love we're talking about. It's a love that is really able to focus on the other, to see the other objectively, without any of our self-concern and self-love and all that involved, but only to see the other and to become a channel of love and light and support for the other. And that is what puts us in touch, as I was saying, with that higher love, with that field of love that is all around us. Okay, so you don't have to stop loving yourself. You just need to learn how to do it for other people too. Okay, you can take example from how your inner mechanism works to learn from that how to love others as yourself. Okay, so we have a little bit of time left. So just to kind of summarize, this is really the way. When we learn how to love, when we learn how to be truly good to ourselves, then we see that it's really the way to unlimited pleasure, to everything that we ever wanted. Because when you look at our world today, even successful people, even people who have money and fame and all the things that you can imagine that people want in our world, they still don't feel self-realized. We all feel deep inside that there's something there that we haven't yet realized, that we haven't yet fulfilled. I don't know if you guys resonate with that, but I feel that this is true. And so if we want to fulfill that deeper place inside of us, then we want to reach that true love of others. We want to become that channel of light. This is where we begin to feel true spiritual pleasure, true unlimited pleasure. It really fills you because when we try to fulfill ourselves on this level, pleasure is fleeting, it's short, right? We know that we're on a hedonic treadmill, we're running after pleasures. But when you learn to love others, you become full by being that channel of love to them. You become full because they are full, because they are happy. It's like a child who is happy and their parent is overwhelmingly delighted just to see that their child is happy. So this is really the trick or the way, the transformation that enables us to experience pleasure way beyond what we can experience in that limited, closed off place of our self-love or self-involvement. When we learn how to transcend ourselves and be connected to others, we enjoy through giving to them in that spiritual sense. And we also connect to the higher power. And this is the greatest fulfillment and self-realization that we can feel in our life. You really become like a parent to the whole world, like a mother or father to the whole world. So you have so much to enjoy. Even though you might feel sadness for a lot of the things that are happening, when you really reach this level of spiritual love, as Kabbalah teaches, you can also bring light and healing to the world parallel to experiencing the lacks. So you feel the lacks that people have, but you know that you're also fulfilling them and healing them just as you feel them. And this is what creates that sense of true self-realization because you become a healer of the world, a light source for the world. And what could be more fulfilling than that? And it's interesting that when you become a channel for this energy, right, it's the light itself. It will solve the problems. You don't need billions of dollars and to start feeding people and finding medications and all those things. Just by being a channel of love and light to them, of that higher energy, you're pulling goodness into the world. And the higher power, it knows how to fix all those things. It knows how to make everything work. We just need to draw it into our life, to become those clean, clear channels that can do that for others. And by the way, in case you were asking, when you do that, then you also heal the things in your life that aren't working because you become aligned with love. And so all those little things that aren't working in your life, like your relationships or health or money problems, they also get fixed on the way. Okay, and just a last quote to end with, and then I'll try to get to as many questions as I can. To achieve our goals, we need a positive environment that focuses on connection because it's in the center of that connection that we will pull and evoke that power of nature that will raise us above our insecurities and help us to experience wholeness, oneness, and true love. So again, we need an environment to help us do that, to replace our current environment that is making us feel so separate and divided and to make us feel like we need to find refuge and self-love. Instead, we need that environment where we all practice loving each other and giving each other room to be all that we can be and to give and to really experience that higher love that wants to fulfill us all. Okay, so now I'm going to take a look and see your questions and let's see if there's anything that we didn't cover. So Nika is asking, What can we do instead of resisting these expensive pursuits of atomized happiness? Okay, how is this? That's a great question. How is spiritual growth going to replace all of those dopamine hits that we get from shopping and right, all those things? So first, I'll say that we don't have to stop buying things or making ourselves happy in little ways. This is all good and you can continue to do that. But I've seen that it really puts things in moderation because you really have a source of fulfillment that is much deeper, that is much greater, and you don't depend on these material things to feel happy. You just do it in a much more sensible way where you buy what you need and even what, gives you a little perk, that's great. But your life is full of much greater happiness because you have friends and people around you who you connect with, and you find so much more joy in that connection, also in your personal relationships. So I would say you don't completely replace it, but you certainly replace dependence on material things with a spiritual fulfillment and the excitement that comes from evolution and constantly discovering new levels of connection. It's really the jackpot for happiness. Okay, I hope that helped. Let's see if there are any more questions. Um, so many people have very little experience with love of any kind. So this is Nika. She's asking, is pursuit of love truly an innate desire for all human beings, like a desire for safety? That's a really nice question. So first, I really resonate with what you said, that we're not being taught how to love, right? People don't have much experience. And in fact, I would say that we've never experienced this kind of love that we're talking about here because we have to enter that special environment where we can experience it. Um, so it's okay if we don't have experience. In fact, it's a good thing. It means we're open to learning how to do it right. And then, is pursuit of love a truly innate desire? Actually, it is. Um, we know Maslow's chart with all the desires that Maslow described that we have, and we know that we have a desire for intimacy, for community and for the family, right? And we know this also from Kabbalah. We all have a natural desire for family and closeness and all of that. Our nervous system is wired to connect with others for safety, and we know that animals have this also. But again, this is our survival mechanism, whereas this spiritual love is a higher desire that we also have, all of us, we have it, but it's more like a spark or a little point. We call it the point in the heart. And we all have it, and it's pulling us to discover this higher state of being. It's pulling us to discover this higher level of consciousness, but it's still unevolved, okay? And for a lot of people, it's still hidden beneath all those other desires and layers, and so they're not actively seeking it. But if you're watching this video, then something in you has probably asked this question of, is this all there is? What's the meaning of life? What is my meaning in life? What's my higher purpose? And that little desire in there in your heart is a desire for true love, to come home to love, to connection. And deep inside, we all have that. Okay. I hope that answered your question, Nika. Let's see if there's anything else. Let's see. So Mel is asking, without self-care and love for self, how can we show up in the world for anyone? Yeah, so I think we answered this question on one of those slides where I did say that self-care is important. We want to take care of ourselves. Otherwise, we won't be able to perform. That is very true. I did want to say one thing about children today because since we have a few minutes, so we know that we're also teaching children to be self-centered. There are these books about the narcissistic generation. And it's because we as parents, we often give them so much attention and we want to be so good that we do things for them, right? And they become kind of pampered. Oftentimes we see that. So here's another tip for us as parents. We do want to give children a sense that they are important and inherently valuable. Like we were saying, we're all valuable parts of the whole, but we also want to help them um, be part of an environment and contribute to their environment. So I heard this really nice example of how you can teach that right from the beginning of life. Like you're a breastfeeding mother, and so as you're sitting down with your baby and they're crying and they're hungry and you want to give them what they want, but you tell them, mommy has to take a few seconds to sit comfortably, and you let the baby wait a few seconds for mommy to sit comfortably. And so just before you feed them, you give them that message that yes, mommy is here for you, but you also should, take mommy into consideration and her needs into consideration. And even just these small examples can help us grow children who are more considerate of their environment and more able to see beyond their immediate needs. Okay, so that was a little nice tip that I wanted to give you. And if there aren't any more questions, then I think we can summarize. I hope this was interesting for you. I think the summary for me is really that we are on this amazing quest for happiness and for love. And we have right now in our environment all these messages that are pulling us in different directions, that are telling us that we can be happy if we love ourselves more, if we do all these things that are still on that same level of consciousness that we see. And it's really helpful to know that there is another way, that there is a higher way that we can do things. And Kabbalah really helps us to understand this process we're in, where it's headed, why we're suffering, and how to do things in a more healthy way. And it helps us so much by telling us that we're not alone in it. We don't have to do it ourselves. The right environment will help us do it. The right environment will be there for us. Okay, it's never something that we can't really change ourselves by pulling ourselves out of the mud. We always want to do it together in an environment where we pull that upper light of nature, and that is what's going to change us and help us transform. Okay, so I want to invite everyone here to join us to a private Q&A on Zoom, where we are going to be able to answer more of the questions and have a more kind of face-to-face talk about this really interesting and important topic. So you have the link in the chat. And yeah, and that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you got your your questions answered, and that you're feeling encouraged by everything that is ahead. I really enjoyed this, and I hope to see you again. So bye for now, and wishing you all the love and happiness and joy there is. Bye, everybody.